So yeah, Legend of Korra over here on representation. Not great. Let's look at some other shows. Some other animated shows that tried to shoehorn in some representation at the end. And I literally do mean at the end, whether or not it was hinted at before in the show, there was nothing else showing that there was any hint of a sexual orientation in these characters until the very last minute of the show. A really good example, Adventure Time. Adventure Time ran for a really long time. I was still in middle school when it came out, and it was out through all high school, and it ended, like, when did it end? Like, recently? I lost track of it when I went to college, although I was still a fan of the show, I just didn't have a means to watch it. That being said, it came to my attention that Princess Bubblegum and Marceline the Vampire Queen ended up being a couple at the end of the show. Points for retcon. Like, the relationship makes sense due to familiarity. Because if you look at the lore of the show, Princess Bubblegum and Marceline are technically both immortal, meaning they knew each other before the events of the show, before Finn and Jake kind of came into the picture. They knew each other. It was hinted at that they had a past, but it wasn't hinted at what really that past was until the writers and the creators of the show said, yeah, it's canon that they dated in the past, that they were a couple, that they were an item, and that they're now exes. But that wasn't said at all in the show. Unless you were keeping up with the show writers, you would have no idea that they were actually a couple in the show. And so if you were completely blind or just an innocent cinnamon bun when you were watching the show, I guess them becoming a couple at the end and their kiss in the very last episode of Adventure Time would have came out of left field. Like, you wouldn't have saw it coming. And therefore, their relationship wouldn't make sense. But again, that whole scene lasted less than a minute. And is that good representation? Nope. Not really. Kind of sad that the LGBT community will accept that representation over actual good representation. But that's going to go over here in front of Korra, because Adventure Time, that was a pretty good retcon. I'll give them points for that, and also, although not every episode was golden, and they were the writers didn't really know how to end, a story, they did a pretty good job with the world building and some retcons, and I might be a little bit biased with nostalgia and everything because I grew up with the show, but they did better than Korra in that forms of representation. Let's look at something a little more recent. Voltron on Netflix, that show. Now, I can't remember what season it was that it was kind of introduced, but the character Shiro, who was the original Black Paladin, and then he was confusedly a clone for a while, then he was confusedly dead for a while, and then he is now confusedly dead Shiro in clone Shiro's body. Just confusing. But apparently, canonically, he is gay, and he had a partner, and that was kind of brought up in an episode, in one episode in particular. I can't remember what season, because Netflix seasons are so all over the place. You have 8 episodes over here, 13 episodes over here, 6 episodes over here for a season. It's not a season. That's like a YouTube channel. Anyway, it was just their seasons were very inconsistent, which is most Netflix shows. But there was a character that they introduced, and I can't for the life of me remember his name, so I'm just going to call him Tom. That might actually be his name. I can't remember because he was so insignificant in the show that it wasn't really worth remembering. But he was apparently Shiro's partner. Now, watching the show, and I binged it because I kind of waited for the whole show to be released so I could just watch it all in one sitting. Watching it, I didn't pick up that that was his partner. They were in a room that I guess looked like an apartment. And they were talking. For all I knew, they could have been best friends or roommates. But the one guy, Tom, was angry for some reason that Shiro was going to go to space because of, he was angry because of his health, that doing that mission would, harm him greatly or just, make him die or something. But anyway, I didn't really pick up that they were a couple. Until much later when Shiro found out that said Tom died. Oh no, it's the bury your gaze trope. Anyway, when Shiro found out about that, that was it, and he was kind of sad about it, and I was like, wait a minute, that was supposed to be his partner? That was his lover? I did not pick up on that at all. But then again, I was probably half asleep when I was watching the show. And other than that, and the creator saying that Shiro was gay, I would not have picked up on that at all in the show until the very last episode, when half a minute was dedicated to Shiro's happy ending when he got married to some random character that I don't even remember if was in the show prior to the ending. It just showed them holding hands, getting married, and then they did a dip kiss, the little dip kiss that couples do. However you do that, I've never done that before. But anyway, just it was shoehorned in the last minute, and that's representation? Don't think so. Still a good show, don't get me wrong. Voltron, I loved Voltron. Pidge, by far, favorite character. And actually, I would argue Pidge is probably asexual, because besides the fact that she is, 12, she's not 12, she's still, in her teens, but she has shown, no interest whatsoever in, being in a relationship, and I dig that. I like that. I like when characters, don't like being with other characters. I live for the single life. Anyway, that's over here. That's kind of right here. Over here with, the bad representation. Now we're going to talk about something that literally just ended, She-Ra and the Princess of Power. Now, this show is a hot mess. It's entertaining to watch, because that's how bad it is. The consistency in the show, the storytelling in the show, and the character development in the show, not great, especially for your main characters. Probably the best character in the show are the villains, because they actually have character, and they actually have character development. Like Cactra, 10 out of 10 was the best character in the show until they introduced Scorpia. She became 10 out of 10 best character in the show. And Entrapta, 10 out of 10 best character in the show. But all the other characters were kind of just but they actually had representation. But it was a good representation. I'm gonna say it was better, but you could have done better. And here's why. There were two characters in the show that were in the series since the beginning, and that are two princesses, Natasha and Spinnerella, and they are canonically married in the show. They don't say it, but they are they don't say it, but they are married in the show. I think they have 2 lines between them in the entire first season and second season and third season. Yeah, they aren't that important. They are literal background characters, and they only show up for maybe 2 battles. Meanwhile, they're there the entire time, just in the background. So, not the best representation. up until like season 4, where they finally got one episode focusing on them completely, and they actually had a little bit of character. You know, they were being a little more competitive. Natasha being the competitive one, and Spinnerella being the one that's kind of like, oh, isn't it cute that I can make you angry because I'm better than you in this sense. It was very much like Gimli and Legolas's, relationship and Lord of the Rings. And when I say relationship, I just mean like their dynamic. That was the dynamic of Natasha and Spinnerella. But yeah, there was only one episode dedicated to that. Then in this more recent season, season 5, those two characters kind of took a more lead role in the show because I guess the showrunners finally realized, hey, here are these two characters that we are not using whatsoever, and they are actually a little more interesting than the actual characters we have. Now, She-Ra as a show as a whole only gets better from the beginning. That's my hot take on it. Because season 1 was a hot mess, season 2 was half a season and was probably worse than season 1. Season 3 should have been, combined with season 2, because again, it was a half season and it was a little bit better. Season 4, why weren't we getting this the entire time? And season 5, again, where was this the entire time? But the lesbians aren't the only ones who were represented in this show. The gays were represented too. That's right, there were 2 Dream Daddies, and I mean that literally. Apparently there's this game called Dream Daddies, and not 1, but 2 character designs for that game were used in this show as a gay married couple for one of the characters in the show. They're like Bo's dads or something. But they only showed up in 2 episodes, and that was in the later seasons. I'm pretty sure. Oh no! It was season 2 that the Dream Daddy showed up, and then they didn't show up again until the 5th season, and they were only in those 2 episodes. They didn't show up again really after that, and they were only used for a plot device. They didn't really have a character other than the fact that they were the division of Bo's personalities. So Bo was like a perfect personality mix between the 2. So that was kind of cool, I guess. A little neat retcon. But again, not the best representation. Like, you could have done better. Although, points to you for actually having more than one gay person in your show. Okay, let's face it. Pretty much all the characters in She-Ra aren't exactly the straightest. They also have a non-binary character in the show, Double Trouble, and they are probably the best character. They're my favorite character. Not because they're non-binary, but because how the character was written and how the character was just so bombastically, fantastic. It was like the theater kid. They were just like... first off, Double Trouble was the shapeshifter, so Double Trouble could literally be anyone at any time, and it just fits so well with the theater kid vibe of just being an actor. It's like how Clayface is in the new Harley Quinn show, how he's like a shapeshifter but an actor, that kind of thing. But Double Trouble took it seriously, and Double Trouble even called the shitty character development out on other characters, and I'm like, yes, good for you. This is a they of quality. But again, She-Ra fell short in terms of the representation. They shoehorned another homosexual relationship in at the very last minute of the season. Now, they did better in the sense that you could kind of feel that the show was going in this direction, not just from the writers, but also from the development of the characters within the show. it was no secret that one of the main villains, Katra, had feelings for the main character, Adora, aka She-Ra. That was no secret in the show. It's just Katra didn't know what these feelings were up until like the end there. Up until like the very last season when she finally reconciled that, hey, maybe she is a bad person and she needs to, do better. By the way, good character development on their part. Katra is probably one of the better characters in the show in terms of character development. Don't get me wrong, she gets pretty horrendous and pretty disgusting in the show, just how she treats people, but you can see how she was treated, and you can see where she's coming from, but you... You didn't do good, honey. You didn't do good. You did bad things to people who said they were your friends, alright? Doesn't give you... your trauma does not give you an excuse to traumatize somebody else. And I think the show did a pretty good job dealing with that. But again, they shoehorned that lesbian relationship in there at the last minute. Katra, admitting her feelings toward Adora, and then Adora saying, Katra, I love you too. But she didn't say it with any emotion. She said it when my friends say they love me, or when I say I love my friends, Hey, best friend, love you. Love you too, best friend. Something like that, right? But then they shared a kiss, and that was kind of it. There was nothing else in the show, really, and I guess it's left to assume that they're now a couple. I don't see it. Honestly, I would have been happier if... I think I would have been happier if Katra was like, yes, I love you, Adora. I've always loved you, Adora. And then Adora would be like, thank you. No, and then Adora would be like, I love you too, but not in that way. And I think because Katra was already kind of thinking that anyway, Katra had already come to terms that Adora didn't love her or want her in that way, and she had already come to terms with that. And I think that would have been better character-wise, just to show that even though if these characters love each other, they don't have to be in a relationship to love each other. They can still be friends and love each other platonically. The only reason why I'm for that versus the lesbian thing is, one, it was shoehorned in at the last minute, and two, Adora hasn't showed any interest romantically or sexually in anyone in the entire show, and I still think she hasn't. Katra kissed Adora, and Adora looked surprised. So I don't think Adora was really sincere about the relationship thing. I'm getting off topic. So here, better representation. Another show? Steven Universe. Now, Steven Universe has some issues, but all in all, I enjoyed the show. I liked the show. I watched every single episode, although some of them I wish I hadn't, because really you can skip a lot of it, especially the Slice of Life episodes. But bottom line is, Steven Universe did have good representation, and they handled it pretty well. Especially since technically the representation isn't actual representation, it's more of an allegory for representation. If you are familiar with the show, or anything about it, you've probably heard the term lesbian space rocks thrown around. Technically, yeah, they are lesbian space rocks, but also technically they're not. They are an alien species. They are the gems. So they are a physical gem that can create a light, a light physical body or whatever, a physical body out of light. It's like a hologram. They're like living holograms, or something. Technically, on their Wikipedia page or whatever, their fandom Wikipedia page, all of the gems are genderless, but they do all use female pronouns. And that's probably because most gems have a more feminine voice anyway, or some masculine voice. Although I did see some gems that looked more masculine, and I'm pretty sure there was a gem, a pebble, that specifically had a male voice actor. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently it's just gems can be whatever gender they want to be, or use whatever pronoun they want to be, because they technically can shapeshift. But there's a character in Steven Universe that gets talked about a lot, and that is Garnet. Garnet is a fusion of two smaller gems called Ruby and Sapphire. Now, Ruby has more masculine characteristics, I'd say. Like, she presents more masculine, and Sapphire presents more feminine. Like, she just wears a dress, has long hair, has more graceful movements. Meanwhile, Ruby, wears like shorts and a shirt, and she has like shorter hair and like a band and like a thing, like a headband or something. She's just like, and she's a little more aggressive and a little more like, I'm going to hit something, toxic masculinity. But the two characters they play well off each other, especially when they're Garnet. They're kind of like, they create an entire new person when they're together, and I think that illusion or that allegory or whatever is kind of beautiful. Garnet is a good representation of how relationships should be, especially in the final seasons of Steven Universe, especially in Steven Universe Future. But they did have a lesbian space rock wedding in Steven Universe, and that wasn't at the end of the series. It was close to the end, but it wasn't at the end of the show. And we got to see these characters be a couple through a pretty good chunk of the show. So I feel like that is better representation, even though if it's technically not real representation, that was better representation than these other shows that I talked about before. So points to Steven Universe for better representation. Moving on to something even more recent, The Dragon Prince. The Dragon Prince is made by the same people who made Avatar and who made Legend of Korra. If you get past the animation style, which it's CGI, it's a CGI 3D animation, but it's literally animated in the exact same way of Avatar, so you have these 3D models making the same faces that the Avatar characters have made. So it's kind of weird, especially since the voice actor for the main character is the voice actor for Sokka and does act like Sokka in a lot of ways. But this show also has Yegates. They are background characters. That's it. They're in there. They are background characters. But they are there. But they're background characters. And they actually do kill off two of them. They were the queen mothers of this one, princess and this one kingdom. I don't know why both of them felt the need to sacrifice themselves. One of them could have done it and it'd been fine, and the other one could have just, lived and actually thought about the care and the needs of their daughter. Whatever. They're there. That's it. They're just there. And that's probably the most, I want to say, realistic representation, is that they're there and they actually do things and they're actually important to the plot. I don't know. I need to go back and watch that show. What was the point of this video? Maybe it's because okay. Here's my point. Here's my point to this video. Here's some food for thought. Is that you can't please your audience. You can't please everyone. Representation is just going to be representation, regardless whether you like it or not. And that's fine. I do feel like representation needs to be represented better and well. Like, actually have good, well-written characters, actually have good thoughts and everything, and maybe... Okay, my point of this is that the so-called haters of, like, these shows, like the people who criticize these shows, don't dislike these shows because of the representation, because the characters are gay or female or non-binary or trans or whatever, whatever token term you can use to, make your show more diverse. No, that's not the reason why people don't like these shows. The reason why people don't like these shows is because they're not good shows. Or they have terrible writing, or terrible, just character development, or whatever. It's just not good. And I laid out a roadmap of representation in these shows, of which one had good representation, which one doesn't. And you see I gave my opinions on which shows I thought were good and which shows I thought weren't. And you see, it's pretty balanced. Over here, you have these good shows that try and represent at the very last minute, and then you also have bad shows that more so focus on representation, but they're still not good. Like, they lack actual good storytelling. And then you have these shows over here who have a good representation but aren't solid. They're not that good. And then so you have some of them who do have decent representation, but they are also pretty decent shows as well. So it's about 50-50. So I don't see your argument, Twitter. I don't see your argument, Netflix, or any other NPC writer for these shows. I don't see your argument of how, you have all of these diverse shows with these representations and these characters, and you have a 50-50 of whether or not the show is actually good and whether or not the representation is good. It's 50-50. And that's how much time and how much effort you put into the show, you put into your characters, and you want to boil it down to your show's success on the fans. You just want to boil it down to that and say, oh, hey, you don't like my show because the characters are gay. That's not the reason. There are lesbian space rocks in Steven Universe, and that is a good show. In my opinion, there are gays and lesbians and The Dragon Prince. That is a good show. There are gay characters in Adventure Time and in Voltron, and those are good shows. There are gay characters in She-Ra and in the Legend of Korra, and I forgot what other shows I talked about. They're not that great of shows, though, and that's okay. Like I said before in earlier videos, you made something. Be proud you made it. Move on. Just ignore the haters. If they're really haters, just ignore them. But like I said, people who critique your shows actually like the shows. And to the people out there who say, well, I'm going to critique it anyway, even though if I haven't watched it. Okay. I've actually watched these shows. I am a fan of most of these shows, and I will critique them, regardless of your representation or not. Because I'm a fan of good writing. I'm a fan of, good character development, regardless of representation or not. In my personal opinion, I think, romantic subplots are stupid. I think that there doesn't need to really be a romantic subplot in any sort of show, or movie, or story to make it good. You can have that without a romantic subplot. But you just gotta shoehorn a relationship in there at the last minute, regardless if it's heterosexual, homosexual, or whatever else is going on down there. Bottom line, people do not hate your franchise, your show, your comic because of the representation. They hate your show, your comic, your franchise because it has bad writing. Because you, as a writer, failed to actually be good at your job. You can't shoe in diverse characters as a token and you can't say, this is their character, you know? They're like totally trans, or they're like totally gay, or they're like totally a lesbian, or they're like totally non-binary, and that's like their whole character, right? You can't do that and expect your fans to actually be happy with that representation, or even happy with that character as a written character. No, your characters, your writing, your story needs to be better. You can't blame the fact that your fans or the people you call haters don't like your franchise or your show because of your representation, because of your token characters that you decided to shoehorn in there at the last minute. It's not the reason that they don't like it. The reason why they don't like it is that you're honestly just bad at your job. So, buck up, move on, learn from it, do better. I'm out. Mic drop, I'm out. Throw the hat, spill the tea, whatever. Thanks for jumping down this rabbit hole with me. I'm the Mad Hatter.